Fort Lewis, Washington, U.S. Army military installation, 1977 and 1978. In 1978, Edwin Godoy, an E-4 soldier with the U.S. Army, was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. This base is adjacent to a forested area in the state's western region. Godoy, a top marksman in the Army, ranked third best in the nation that year. One evening, during a return from war games in the forest, the truck carrying Godoy's platoon broke down and lost power. The acting commander decided to walk the soldiers back to the base and ordered Godoy to stay and guard the truck overnight, which was unusual since typically 2 soldiers would be assigned this task.
I stayed behind as the others left around 8 p.m. At about 12:15 a.m., I spotted a tall, hairy figure about 300 meters away, standing by some pine trees. It was massive, with a body covered in dark, long, grayish hair.
The figure, resembling a giant, swayed side to side while staring at Godoy with glowing red eyes. The moon was behind it, and there were no lights in the area, so the red glow from its eyes appeared to be self-luminous. The figure began running towards him.
I shouted a halt 3 times, and when it did not respond, I fired a warning shot into the air and then shot at the figure. The creature grabbed its chest, let out a loud moan, and then fled into the forest.
Convinced he had encountered a Bigfoot, Godoy locked himself inside the truck until morning. At 6 a.m., 2 mechanics arrived to tow the truck. Godoy explained what had happened, but they were skeptical. They investigated the area and found large human-like footprints and small pools of oily, fresh-looking blood. The mechanics radioed the base to report the incident, and shortly after, the truck started on the first try.
Around 7:30 a.m., several men in white lab coats arrived, taking samples from the footprints in the blood. I wasn't permitted to speak with them and was instructed to return to Fort Lewis immediately.
Upon arrival, an Air Force medical officer, a colonel, awaited Godoy. This was unusual since Fort Lewis was an Army base. The colonel conducted a thorough debriefing and a complete medical examination, asking specific questions about the distance from the creature, its description, and any symptoms Godoy might have had. Numerous samples were taken from Godoy, but the colonel did not reveal his purpose or origin.
Later, I was summoned to the base commander's office, where I was ordered to keep silent about the incident or face court-martial. Heading back to my room, a fellow soldier, L. Robles, who worked in the hospital lab, approached me. Robles revealed that the blood samples they analyzed contained human blood cells, animal blood cells, and chlorophyll, indicating something extraordinary.
Reflecting on the incident, Godoy believed that the base commander and others knew more about the creature and had reasons for keeping it secret. He recalled seeing bottles of a greenish glowing substance in a heavily secured vault at the base, wondering if there was a connection.
I felt I might have been deliberately left alone with the truck, possibly as bait. I concluded that the government and military knew more about the strange occurrences in the Northwest than they let on.
Second letter from Craig Bennett, Pemberton, New Jersey. Dear Miss Short, I have never encountered a Bigfoot or any related phenomena. However, I found the accounts from military personnel on your website intriguing. Back in December 1977, while I was a freshman at Burlington County College in Pemberton, New Jersey, I overheard an unusual conversation. The college is near McGuire Air Force Base and Fort Dix Army Base, so it was common to see military personnel on campus. While sitting in the snack bar, I noticed a soldier walk in and sit at a table. Another soldier joined him, excitedly asking if he had heard the news about a platoon from a base, possibly Fort Lewis in Washington, encountering Bigfoot during an exercise in the Pacific Northwest. The first soldier, looking nervous, urged the other to discuss it later, not in public. I never saw those soldiers again and did not pursue the matter further as I was focused on my studies. Sincerely, Craig Bennett.
Mystery in the Rockies. The encounter on Blackfeet Reservation. It was a particularly warm autumn day in 1982. a day that seemed perfect for a hunting trip on horseback through the picturesque foothills of the Rockies on the Blackfeet Reservation in Big Sky Country, Montana. I can hardly remember the exact date, but the events of that day remain vivid in my mind. I was 14 years old, eager for adventure, and the company of my cousins added to the excitement of our expedition. We set out with high hopes, our spirits lifted by the gentle warmth of the sun and the stunning scenery around us. Initially, we had planned a serious hunt, but halfway into the trip, we decided to relax and enjoy the ride, hoping that luck would bring us some game along the way. The day progressed pleasantly, the rhythmic clop of our horses' hooves providing a soothing soundtrack to our journey. Yet the thought of bagging a deer lingered in the back of everyone's mind. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, we decided to take a brushy trail home. We hoped that we might still encounter some game before the day was done. The trail was narrow and thick with underbrush, a perfect spot for deer to hide. Our horses, sensing the change in the atmosphere, began to move cautiously, their hooves stepping softly on the forest floor. My cousin's horse, however, was particularly reluctant, fighting the bridle bit and acting skittish. We assumed it was because the horse was green-broke, still not fully accustomed to the rigors of the trail. But as we ventured deeper into the brush, all our horses started behaving strangely. They snorted nervously, their ears twitching, as if something foul had invaded their senses. The tension in the air was palpable. Just as we were nearing the end of the trail, our horses suddenly began to leap in different directions, clearly spooked by something unseen. The first thought that crossed our minds was a bear. We frantically scanned the surroundings, trying to pinpoint the location of the threat. It was then that I heard one of my cousins swear and shout for us to look in a specific direction. Following his gaze, I saw it, a tall figure running on two legs beside us, moving with a speed and grace that seemed almost otherworldly. The creature crossed the trail in front of us, just about 40 feet away, and stopped at the edge of the brush. It stood there, staring at us with an expression that mirrored our own astonishment. The moment felt surreal, as if time had slowed down. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the creature vanished into the trees. The best way I can describe it is as the hairiest man I have ever seen, standing well over 6 feet tall. Its size was hard to determine precisely, but the broken branches we found the next day ranged from 6 to 8 feet high. We discovered footprints in places where the ground was soft, leading along the trail we had followed towards the mountains. That night, we rode back in silence, each of us lost in our thoughts, trying to process what we had witnessed. The encounter had left us shaken, and we spoke little of it afterward. I never mentioned it to anyone else, partly out of fear of being ridiculed and partly because I wasn't entirely sure of what I had seen. But now, as a 30-year-old looking back on that day, I feel compelled to share the story. The Blackfeet Reservation is a land rich with legends and mysteries, where the past and present often blur. Our encounter with that mysterious creature added another chapter to the tapestry of stories that have been passed down through generations. The memory of that day has stayed with me, a reminder of the unexplained wonders that lie hidden in the vast wilderness of the Rockies. Charles K. Wolftail. As the years went by, I often found myself replaying that day in my mind, searching for answers. What was it that we had seen? Was it a bear, as we initially thought, or something else entirely? The creature's upright gait and human-like features suggested it was no ordinary animal. Some nights, as I lay awake, I wondered if it could have been a Bigfoot, the legendary creature spoken of in hushed tones among the Native American tribes of the region. Our tribe has always respected the land and its inhabitants, both seen and unseen. The elders spoke of spirits and creatures that roamed the forests, guardians of the natural world. Could our encounter have been with one of these guardians, The thought both fascinated and unnerved me. Despite the passage of time, the details of that day remain sharp in my memory. The warmth of the sun on our backs, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the sudden fear that gripped us when our horses panicked. I remember the look in the creature's eyes as it stared at us, a look that seemed to convey a sense of curiosity, perhaps even recognition. In the years following the encounter, I continued to hunt and explore the wilderness of the Blackfeet Reservation. Each time I ventured into the forest, I felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, wondering if I might encounter the creature again. But it never happened. The memory of that day became a story I kept to myself, a personal mystery that I pondered in quiet moments. As I grew older, I began to share the story with close friends and family. Their reactions ranged from disbelief to intrigue, but all agreed that the experience was extraordinary. Some suggested we had encountered a rare species, an undiscovered animal that had managed to elude scientific classification. Others believed it was a spiritual being, a manifestation of the land's ancient powers. In sharing my story, I found a sense of connection to my heritage and the land that has always been a part of my identity. The Blackfeet Reservation is more than just a place. It is a living, breathing entity with its own mysteries and stories. Our encounter with the creature in 1982 became a part of that larger narrative, a reminder that we are not alone in this world and that there are still wonders to be discovered. The experience also deepened my respect for the natural world and its inhabitants. It reminded me that we are merely guests in a land that has been home to countless generations of creatures, both known and unknown. It taught me to tread lightly and to be mindful of the signs and signals that nature provides. As I look back now, I am grateful for that day and for the mystery it brought into my life. It has shaped my understanding of the world and my place within it. It has also given me a story to tell, one that I hope will inspire others to look beyond the ordinary and to embrace the unknown with a sense of wonder and respect. The Blackfeet Reservation remains a place of beauty and mystery, a land where the past and present coexist in a delicate balance. Our encounter in 1982 was just one of many stories that this land holds, a reminder that the world is full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. And as long as there are curious minds and open hearts, those secrets will continue to reveal themselves, one story at a time.
Mystery in the Timpanogos, a chilling encounter. It was a crisp evening in June 1977 when my friend Brett and I decided to hike Mount Timpanogos, a majestic peak in the Timpanogos mountain range near Provo, Utah. The nearest water source was Deer Creek Reservoir, and the closest road was the scenic Alpine Loop. We aimed to start our hike early the next morning, so we drove up the night before, planning to sleep in the car at the Aspen Grove trailhead. As we settled in for the night, patches of snow still clung to the ground, remnants of an early spring. We chatted with the car windows slightly rolled down for ventilation. It was around 10:30 p.m. when we heard footsteps behind the car.
"Who's there?"
Brett called out into the darkness. There was no response. Given that we hadn't seen any other cars or people all night, we were immediately on edge. The situation took a turn for the bizarre when the rear of the car suddenly sank, as if something heavy was pressing down on it. Startled, Brett started the car and swung it around, shining the headlights into the meadow behind us. We caught a fleeting glimpse of a shadow disappearing into the trees. Thinking it might be someone playing a prank, we drove around the area but found no cars, no people, nothing. Thoroughly spooked, we decided to head back home for the night. Determined not to let the strange encounter deter us, we returned early the next morning to hike the mountain. The parking lot looked ordinary enough, with no signs of what had transpired the previous night. We began our ascent, soon encountering significant snow about 1.5 miles up the trail. It was there that we noticed a series of footprints veering off the trail and straight up the hill. These prints were enormous, spaced far apart. At 6'1", I couldn't leap from one to the next. Intrigued and unnerved, we decided to follow them, traversing up the mountain. As we approached the base of some cliffs, an eerie sensation washed over us as if we were being watched. The snow was about 2 feet deep, making further progress impossible. Given the high avalanche danger, we reluctantly decided to turn back. As we descended a mile down the trail, we were hit by a stench so foul it made our eyes water, like a rotting animal. That uneasy feeling of being watched returned stronger than ever. Brett and I looked at each other, and in unison we said,
"Let's get out of here."
The sense of urgency was overwhelming. Even now, that experience haunts me. I never saw what it was, and I still can't explain those footprints. Growing up around these mountains, I've seen countless tracks and wildlife, but nothing like this. Most people I've shared this story with think I'm crazy, but it really happened. Kevin Burgess, Orem, Utah.